to be confused with Ralph Stephen, his brother and broker owner of Royal LePage Atlantic, or Jason Ralph, as is often the case in our network here. Jason has been involved in organized real estate for over 20 years and has chaired and served on a number of local, provincial, and CREA boards, culminating in his current role as president of CREA with just 1 week left in his tenure. Which brings us to our next guest today, CREA's president-elect, Costa Poulopoulos. Costa brings a broker's perspective to today's discussion as co-founder of Street City Realty in London, Ontario. With over 28 years of experience as a realtor, Costa has served organized real estate through various roles, including stints as president of both his local board and his provincial association. Welcome, Jason and Costa, and Phil, who of course needs no introduction. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. Over to you, Phil.
Well, let me start right off the bat by thanking these two gentlemen. They have given selflessly of themselves for us. Like all public servants, they have normal lives, they have families, they have professions, they like to earn a living, but they also heed the call to serve. And my goodness me, did you ever get dealt a big hand, both of you, in terms of what you have to deal with, both as the current and the president-elect. So, a big virtual applause for those who serve, and particularly you two at the very pinnacle of organized real estate in this country. And I would like to say at the very pinnacle of organized real estate worldwide, because I believe the Canadian Real Estate Association, the associated boards, provincial associations, is the most sane and workable group of real estate professionals in the world. And that's where I'd actually like to start today's conversation with advocacy. Never has there been a time in my memory where we have partnered with government to understand how we can support the Canadian economy, and they in turn can support an important part of that, which is the Canadian realtor. Which one of you would like to start to talk a little bit about government relations and what CREA is doing for brokerages and realtors across the country? Do you want to start, Mr. President?
Sure. First of all, Phil, I just want to throw a shout out and thank you so much. You look at the participant list down here; it's phenomenal. If I may just divert from your question, then I'll circle back to it just for about a minute and a half. I promise I'll be brief, and for me that's difficult sometimes. But I guess I just want to say, in the face of adversity, this has challenged our inner leadership across all spans of real estate. Phil, you're a CEO of a national organization. We're leadership of a national organized real estate arm, and everywhere in between. And everybody stepped up to that challenge and that face of adversity. And we're proud of that. We're resilient. We're professional. And I do think rationally and thoughtfully that our markets are paused and deferred. We're blessed to be in a business where these incomes haven't been lost. My heart breaks for restaurant owners and people that just will never be able to recapture that back. So I want to start by saying that. And I also want to give a quote that I give every time I'm on one of these. It's a quote from Albert Einstein. It's the only thing I've prepared. And it's, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking used when they were created." We've got to really start to challenge ourselves to think outside of this. There's no bigger disruptor. Phil, Costa, we've all been a part of strat planning sessions for a dozen years, and we all thought technology was going to disrupt it. But this pandemic has been the biggest disruptor. So I'm going to now bridge that into your question. It's been the biggest.
That's a great intro, by the way.
But it's been the biggest disruptor, but it's also, and we were talking about this offline, but it's also challenged everybody to step up and rise to the challenge. And honestly, the staff at CREA have stepped up and worked 24/7, whether it's, and across the board. And we were blessed because we were all set up a number of years ago on cloud-based computing. So working from home has provided little to no interruption. It's created a little bit more emails in people's lives. but the GR staff working 24/7. When the Prime Minister's office calls you at 11 o'clock at night, you can't say, well, I'll deal with that tomorrow. You have to take that phone call. And so, I will say, because I have had the blessing to see this firsthand, the staff at CREA have stepped up, and I sent a nice note on Friday to recognize the fact that they have worked on behalf of the 134,000 realtors without, your intro to us was very nice. Same thing with them. So on that, we look at some of the programs out there. Costa is going to talk about a few of the programs as well, but we look at the CREB program, which is the $2,000. If you are going to miss 14 consecutive days or have missed 14 consecutive days, we have, based on the last information that came out, it's clear that it's on pay, not on work. I've said in different venues that realtors never stop working. My ability to get paid for work, though, is diminished, extremely since March the 12th. And even really since April, since the beginning of April, my pipeline is now empty. So at the end of the day, if you feel that you can apply for these, please do that. And we've also said to people, and we can throw out a contact person in your organization to communicate with our CEO. At the end of the day, if we're getting denied en masse, we need to know that. We need the real life examples to how somebody in St. John's, Newfoundland, or Kamloops, BC, has applied and felt that they could apply and has a business case out there to receive it. So, that's step one. Step two, that program only extended itself to self-employed people that collected EI, and we advocated to bring in the broader base of realtors. So I'm proud that's a win. The Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy, I don't know what that acronym is. I keep forgetting about it. That's really the one that brokerages can, use to stay alive through this period.
With brokerage staff,
right,
conveyancing staff that are just not working. They have nothing to do. Yeah, absolutely.
So we think that some of the changes the government just recently announced and passed in the legislation on Saturday will account for it. We're digging a little bit deeper. There's some language, accrual accounting, and which may mean when a deal becomes firm versus paid, which is a big deal because CREA had been advocating for when the deal was written, because we can prove, Phil, that deals written have reduced by that 30% margin year over year.
Absolutely.
The problem is, well, it's a good and bad problem. All of the economies in Canada were driving into this pandemic at a pace that, that gave us a great base. The problem to that is on this, people wouldn't see that loss in that window because it's a shorter window. The individual program, the CREB, is open until October the 3rd. So it is really going to take in the people most needing. You can apply right up until December 3rd. This one has a shorter window, I think, of June 6th. So we're asking people, stay patient. Go to your CREA emails. We are going to continue to advocate for government. It may have just got changed. We're going to know more. And Costa, there's another program or two out there as well.
Thank you, Jason. And I want to start off by actually saying thank you for giving us the opportunity, Phil and your team. Kudos to you and the leadership that you've shown throughout this country. Quite admirable. And that's the kind of leadership that when Jason's talking about working at all levels and all parties, from local associations to brands, to brokerages, to everyone. So thank you for the opportunity, and kudos to you for an outstanding job for all of us in this country. I do want to touch on what Jason has mentioned, and that is, the concern, and to your question specifically, I do want to add on, I mean, the concerns that realtors have and the brokerages have, broker owners, are the same across the country. They're the same across every brand. They're the same across every level. It's as a realtor is, oh my God, how am I going to survive this? How long is it going to take? If I don't make a sale, how am I going to be able to sustain this? Am I going to be in the business? For brokerages, broker viability. How long is this going to last if sales are diminished? And so to Jason's point, it is business pause. It's not business lost, but the pause is the key question. And so on behalf of Canadian realtors and members across the country, the association is trying to figure out, okay, let's advocate. Let's make sure that any programs that the government is putting out, any programs that are out there, are going to encompass and are going to capture our realtor members. And so far, as Jason said, the CRB has done that. There was a lot of tweaking that was going on. And originally, when it came out, it didn't capture our realtor members, but it has now, in the level that if you missed out on 14 consecutive days, and Jason's touched on this, from March 15th, if you have not received from March 15th until March 29th, 0 income and got a closing on March 30th, you can apply for that that first period, that first 4-week period. So that was a tweak that we were on and trying to clarify and trying to make sure. And that's the fluidity of this. And so in fairness to the federal government, not being partisan, they've done a great job rolling out, as all governments have, provincial and federal, to assist, and kudos to them. You know what? They put a lot of liquidity in the market, and they're trying to keep the banks liquid and trying to keep things flowing as best as they can. The turnaround is unbelievable. This has never happened in a period of the short period that they've rolled out.
Right.
This
Typically, it would take a year or more for major government programs to be tested and rolled into market.
Exactly. And so this is where we got to give kudos to them for putting that out. And that's where the tweaking needs to happen. And that's where we as a national association are on top of that to make sure that the tweaking is representative of our members as well. And so we're happy to say it's kind of like they're putting it out there. It's ready, fire, aim, and it's like,
right.
Oh, okay, wait a second, now we got to fix it again. So that's where we're at. And so Jason mentioned the CRB. He also mentioned the CWS, the wage subsidy, and Phil, you touched on that. That deals with employees and staffing, and that's great. And then there's a third one as well, which is the Canadian Emergency Business Account for businesses, and that's through each bank, and it's kind of funneled through the federal government, but you apply at your bank, and that's a $40,000 loan. And there's some criteria there. Every bank probably on their site has that's offered. If you have between $50,000 and I think $1 million in payroll, I don't know the full details exactly. I don't want to get that granular, but it's there. Yep. It's a $40,000 loan, and if you pay it back by a certain time, they forgive the $10,000 of that 40. So that's another program as well for brokerages, and we're monitoring. All of these things are being monitored, and we're doing our best to make sure that the tweaks that are necessary are heard, and hopefully we'll have the tweaking that we need.
Well,
Phil, I want to touch on something there before
sure.
That Costa brought up that I take for granted, and it's so important that people understand this. From day one, the federal government really did their job and stepped up and overfunded CMHC and overfunded banks. And it's why I think a lot of realtors, I don't know of any examples, but temporary layoffs haven't crashed deals.
It's true.
Lenders funded those mortgages to create that pipeline to continue. And honestly, if that hadn't been done from day one, it's not a sexy thing. They haven't, they're not looking from it from an announcement point of view. They're just trying to plug the holes. I've said to a lot of people, there's no script to this, man.
Well, and you know what? It's pretty cool because you were a young conservative.
So that's saying something. Absolutely.
Exactly. Isn't it cool how the partisan walls have just fallen down in Canada? Not in the United States, but in Canada, we really do see traditional foes pulling together to solve problems. I saw Jason Kenney compliment the Prime Minister last. I mean, I had to put it on rewind. It was pretty cool.
Well, for them to step up and do that really saved a lot. I mean, here's what I've said to a lot of people. I don't think we're in the essential workers category like nurses, doctors, paramedics, firefighters, but we provide people the essential, a basic essential need, and that's a roof over their head. That's housing. And we have to be in that, as you said on your video on the weekend, in almost all parts of Canada, we've been labeled essential, not for business as usual, but to continue that pipeline. So I think governments on all levels, whether it be provincial or federal, have recognized that housing's a big thing, and they can't, it's not about, politics. It's about making sure that people have a roof over their head and that people have an ability that bought a house pre-pandemic, without selling their house, they can sell their house. And so there's different ways around that. And Costa raises great points, and they got from day one. And the other thing, CREA's built up relationship with both, mainly the three main parties gave us a springboard to get right into this with people.
It's increasingly Canadians are recognizing the contributions of what I've been calling midline essential workers, not frontline like those in uniform or of course our brave medical professionals, but people from delivery people and grocery workers to lawyers and realtors who are putting themselves in harm's way and doing work that really needs to get done. There isn't anybody out there these days that's just casually shopping around. If you list a home now, you really need to get that home sold. There's urgent need, and thank goodness for all of you out there who are willing to step up and serve in these difficult times, and we thank you. Hey, listen, Realtor, the Realtor brand, the realtors that make up companies like Royal LePage and have for 100 years. Do you think the Realtor brand is being elevated in these times? Do you think it matters in times of crisis?
Oh, absolutely. That's how, if there's one message that's clear, the times of crisis brings out the person that really is, in my opinion. Kind of a joking thing that I've said to a client of mine over the weekend was, back in my day of dating, I'd have to date somebody 5 or 6 times to figure out if they were crazy. I can hop on social media and tell, generally get a good assessment of people. So, it's really important that we, for the lobbying that CREA is doing and for the effective success that people really hone down on the interprofessional side. There is no profession that's prouder to be a professional in their community and community leaders like realtors. I have been blessed to see that coast to coast and now virtually over the last 25 days or so. And I know that, but we're asking people to stay calm, stay rational, work with CREA, work with your provincial associations in this time of need. And now's not the time to battle. And I know that's not happening, but there's some people out there that could really, I don't think people realize that sometimes a minority can really damage, when we talk about the very important thing of advocacy, if politicians see that behavior, then it goes from a partnership to, we'll deal with people that want to work with us. And I know that's not happening, Phil, but
you know what I think, Jason, I think it's a testament to people radically changing. Costa, you talked about how the government had to change on a dime. We have 130,000 members who had to change their business practices virtually overnight. And the compliance with the highly restrictive way in which we need to practice these days to keep ourselves, but more importantly, our consumer clients safe, was amazing. I worry sometimes that, the members don't read what we send them, don't listen what we send them. They're busy people, but, and there was a tiny little handful that the message on open houses being a way of the past, in-person open houses with a group of people gathered together, just not being appropriate. A tiny little bit of that still went on. What it cost me, let me ask you something. Are you familiar with the iBuyer concept, sort of FSBO online? What I've noticed in the US is the big iBuyer companies like Zillow and Open Door and such have virtually disappeared from the market. What do you think a crisis like this, where we're leveraging technology, says about the importance of a human advisor in the transaction when we're leaning on technology so hard? I know it's a bit of an obscure question, but I know you're up to it.
Well, that's a great question, Phil. Actually, that is a fantastic question. And the answer to that, I'm sure, look, we faced as an industry, as a profession, many challenges over the years. So you go back and at every time when we went through that crisis, it was a crisis, and it was genuine, and it was real, and it was, oh my goodness, how are we going to get out of this? And the one thing that endured, and the one thing that's going to endure again in this crisis, is that consumers are in need of a trusted advisor. They're in need of expertise. You know what? The value of a strong ethic in our realtor brand is essential. What that stands for. I mean, you and your brand exemplify that. We try to exemplify that for realtors across Canada. It means something, and consumers, when you work together, and when we say this from a CREA perspective, all brands, all realtors across the country, when we work together collaboratively and raise the bar of our profession, you know what, with integrity for our members and for our consumers that are homeowners or are looking to purchase or get into the housing market. So there will always be a need, if not always be a need, more so now than ever, that consumers will be turning to us as trusted advisors. And for all things real estate, they will reach out to their realtor to navigate through this craziness that's happening and to make sense of it. And I have to tell you that as you said, Phil, and I echo that, most of the realtors across this country have stepped up, and they're leaders at the realtor level in their community. The broker owners, the brokerages are realtors at that level, and we pooled together, and we're actually making a difference. And that's what we're going to come out of stronger and better when the pause is lifted. I think the realtor brand will be strengthened across this country.
Well, thank you for that. And I couldn't agree more. I sort of led that question mentioning iBuyers, but I didn't really explain what had happened. And for those on the line, iBuying is an American experiment, very tiny little slice of the market where you can sell your company, sell your home online, and then someone will buy it online. And it's virtually disappeared in these times. And you'd think maybe, well, that's a great technology to use at this time. No, at this time, it shows what I believe will be the future. And that is a highly technology-enabled personal advisor that deals human to human to aid in this incredibly important family transaction called the home sale or purchase. To that point, Jason, wow, CREA has just been acting rapidly to upgrade and update the gem, the diamond of Canadian professional or organized real estate, realtor.ca. Can you give us a little bit of an update on some of the things that have happened in recent weeks with Canada's most visited real estate website, realtor.ca?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So to what you and Costa were talking about earlier, we did find that some people were still doing in-person open houses, and we couldn't really regulate. We were asked to regulate, but we can't regulate a national housing policy rule on open houses. But what we could do is strip down the advertising of that on our premier site and the #1 site in the Canadian marketplace. And so we did that. And that is, that was done by our board and in a leadership position. And we were assured that staff would work, tirelessly for an effort to replace that. And, I'm proud to say, like Costa and I were talking earlier, and in about a week and a half, the staff built a platform for virtual open houses. And,
Really?
it speaks to the people in that building at 200 Catherine Street, for them to do that in that short amount of time is, it's similar to the government. Like this would take
even
time.
Works.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I fielded a few questions over social media over the weekend with how it's going to finish off. And it's new to us, and we're committed to getting those answers. It will work. And, I said to a lot of people, it's not like we're going to look back on this time and celebrate it, but we're going to look back on this time and think, wow, that pandemic of 2020 really changed the landscape of real estate. And this virtual open house platform is not going to go away. It's going to stay. It's going to get strengthened. We're doubling down on all of our technology with trying to eliminate the face-to-face and create a virtual offering for home sellers, because we do believe there's essential transactions in the marketplace that have to take place out there. Not that we're doing it out of what could be. It's basically what we've been talking about through this webinar, which is a need-based scenario. So that's going to enhance through this. I know in my home community of St. John, New Brunswick, that's gonna completely change my offering, because we have a lot of people that are looking into our market from away, and it's hard. Until this time came, it was hard to. But people are now becoming more familiar with Zoom, and it's going to be Zoom. You're going to be able
Google
to upload from Zoom and Facebook Live and Instagram Live and YouTube. And all these platforms that people are now becoming aware of because of this pandemic. So. It's changed the face of technology, and it will continue to do so. And the one message I've been telling people crystal clear for the over 500 people on this call right now: the National Association is with you now, and the National Association will be with you when we come out of this. And this is just one offering that talks about how we're going to get better, and we will get better, and we will strengthen it throughout the time.
Cool. Costa, what do you think some of the enduring behavioral changes will be that come out of working our way through this crisis? Because we all know this is a limited time crisis, but a crisis unlike we've ever seen before. So we saw 1 million people go on unemployment last week. Now, it's both very sad that they tend to be young people, and they tend to be part-time workers in general, and those aren't people who will influence real estate prices dramatically, but it will influence consumer confidence. In other words, it'll give it a sharp negative shock when we see unemployment leaping like it is. So we're responding as a society. I'm sure your family, my family, getting together using virtual meeting technology like this. What do you think some of the enduring sort of changes will be that come out of COVID-19 fight?
Those are great questions, Phil. And I think throughout every obstacle, throughout every crisis, there's always an opportunity that we come out of this with. The opportunity could be that we've learned something that makes us better. And as a profession, I actually believe that what we've all adjusted to doing, realtors that have never used a video conference call, never been part of a Zoom meeting, never been part of any of this technology, are from 0 to 100 in 3 days. And it's like mind-boggling. Say, wow, we've been talking about doing this. This is the way of the future. It's going to happen. Well, there was no choice. So we actually learned really quick, and we realized that, wow, this technology is actually working, and we can actually continue to do business. So I think what's going to come out of this when we're done is we're just going to capitalize and build on that. And we're actually going to get better. It'll never replace us as a trusted advisor. It'll never replace us, the expertise that we bring to the table. It's just a tool that's going to enhance our knowledge, our expertise, and us being the go-to source when clients, consumers want to figure out, hey, there's so much more that we're going to be a part of. If that has to be a little bit in a virtual way, that doesn't negate us or take us out of the equation. It just gives us an opportunity to engage more frequently. And
exactly.
So, and not only as a practitioner in the field, but I have to tell you that from a Canadian Real Estate Association perspective, maybe this is the way from now on that we are able to reach out to membership more often, where we can actually have the board of directors, 16 of us, go to every sales meeting, or not every sales meeting, but engage with members directly in some odd, ironic way. It's kind of more personal, because you're going to be in a room of 50 people, and you're going to have the president-elect, the vice president, director of CREA, and you'll be able to engage and converse. So you'll have a lot more engagement at a much reduced cost. With that cost savings, we can throw it back into things that will enhance the member benefits to our members. So I think that's a positive thing. And I'm sorry if I've gone up, but to your first part.
No, not at all.
The first part of your question, I actually think, yes, it's 1 million jobs and that part of it. And here's the take that we look at, that at some point when this is over and the pause is lifted, there was such a high demand. The built up demand for housing that was there pre-March 12th will be there when we're done, because people still want to get into the game. Now, the job part of it, maybe we may have a little bit of a delay, but we will bounce back.
Absolutely.
Stock market, you know, compared to the stock market, you can't live in an RSP. At some point, housing is essential at all levels. If it's renting, it's all spectrum. So we're positioned, and as Jason has said, we were kind of the last ones to get hit, but we're going to be probably the first ones to recover, because a resale home sale, if you look at the Altus report, brings to the economy, spin-off economic business, somewhere in the neighborhood of $64,000. That's when every time you sell a house, lawyer fees, appraisers, furnishings, appliances, home renovations, it rolls the economy. And believe me, that's one thing that's going to help us get back on track is housing. So we're positioned in a great spot.
You know,
Yeah, I want to jump in on that.
Sure.
Costa raises a fantastic point. I'm now on client number 3, and I'm just a realtor in small town St. John, New Brunswick, that has called me now and said, when we get out of this pandemic, I'm listing my house. People are living in their house a lot differently. You know, I've got a family with a 14 and 10-year-old. They're very active. You know, we get them on the bus. You know, I dialed it down to about 3 hours where I'd spend time in my house. Now I'm in my house for, for 12, 14 hours wandering.
You're getting good use out of that house.
You know, I've now converted my dining room into an in-house office, and, you know, it's people are living in their house a lot differently. So they're either figuring out, I'm going to go through the other business I think that's going to come out of this is home renovations. I think people have now figured out either they're going to stay and renovate, or the house doesn't fit their needs. Mostly it's been too small. That's been the scenario I'm coming to is we figured out that our house is too small. And if this ever happens again, we're not equipped for it. So we're going to,
You want to stay married?
Yeah. Well, no. I'm saying my house is fine. God, don't let my wife hear that. No, the people that have called on me to say, you know, can you start to do a market analysis on what the value of my house would be? You know, because they figured out that their house is too small. And I think it will change how people look at this from that dynamic. The other thing I'll say, Phil, is, you know, you get this, you have contact with on the ground members. The CREA leadership, we go to conferences and we're inputted in Facebook sites to what Costa was saying, we're engaging. You know, with this call, I will have reached in the last 25 days over 3,000 members of our 132,000 members.
Pretty cool.
You know, in one day
and many more through the repeated viewings of the recorded material.
Right. So what, you know, this is in the face of this adversity, there's a huge opportunity to be able to communicate our message and, you know, national wide. I mean, in one day I was in St. John, Halifax, Kamloops, Penticton, you know, Toronto, Ottawa. I mean, Air Canada, God love them. They couldn't have got me to all those locations in one day. So
I know personally, I'm taking like 10-minute meetings all over the place. And getting around the GTA alone kills huge amounts of time. You both have traveled here. It's a nightmare. And, you know, I'm able to be in Burlington for 10 minutes and then in St. John for 10 minutes back to back. It's pretty cool. I don't think it won't replace, like, for example, the amazing awards events we do where everybody gets together. I'm not sure there'll be quite as much hugging and kissing as at a normal Royal LePage event, but we'll see. But it's a gathering of people that people feel. I mean, a hockey game won't be a hockey game without people in the stands, but in the seats. But I think we can leverage this technology to be more efficiently delivering the services we need to do. And when, you know, our realtors get on board, they just need their clients to get on board. Now they can push them a certain way, but if they really think the only way a client's going to see value is face-to-face, that's what they do. Now clients have seen, well, I can get value in a quick update via FaceTime. And that is complete. As a matter of fact, I prefer that because it saves me time as a consumer client as well. And then those face-to-face meetings for the more in-depth driving in. Let me pose a question on the value of homes, and you guys can sort of weigh in on what you think is going to happen to home prices. if you look back to 2008-9, now we had corrections in 18-19 with the introduction of the federal stress test. We had a correction in 2012, some overshooting in the 9 to 11 timeframe. But the last really big market slowdown was the Great Recession and the collapse of the American financial system in 2008. If you look what happened in 2009, young people, and particularly young home buyers, were back in market that spring. It was kind of a little later than normal, but they were back in market, and housing in the ensuing 2 years, and you kind of hinted at this, Costa, housing was not just a major driver, it was the major driver of the economic recovery following the Great Recession and its impact on Canada. I feel that housing can lead the Canadian economy out of this recession. And, you know, our viewers should understand we are now in an economic recession where the economy is contracting, unemployment is rising. I believe housing can lead us out of this the same way it has in the past. Either of you like to comment on what you think is going to happen to home prices, where this market's going? Costa,
Want me to jump in, Costa, or want me to jump in, or you want to jump in for? You know, there isn't a national housing market. There's all different markets across our beautiful country. And we advocate with that with government when we talk about things like stress testing and stuff. There's more, you know, to local markets. On a very 10,000 foot level, our economic base heading into this was so strong. You know, I was blessed to have just had the best start I've ever had in my 21 years in this business. You know, in the last 3 months, you know, my days on market decreased, you know, immensely over the last year and a half to 2 years. And I'm in a smaller market. I'm not in the GTA, you know, you know, that snowball kind of was going. And so, you know, I honestly believe, like Costa said, you know, I believe we were last in, we'll be first out of this. I also believe the government understands very much with the, you know, with their programs being what they don't want to have happen. They don't want the implosion of realtors to go away. They don't want the implosion of brokerages to go away, because their quickest way to economic prosperity out of this is a transaction. Whether it be, you know, realtors going to spend money at local restaurants, you know, to infuse those businesses, you know, appliances, furniture sales, all that's wrapped into the economic activity. And Costa's bang on about that Altus report. The spin-offs is amazing. And we've always said that to government. We kind of felt like we weren't sure if they heard our message, but we understand that they know this. And I think it would have very long-lasting effects if our economic foundation was shaky heading into this, or I guess ultimately if these temporary layoffs go to permanent. But I'm not feeling that. I feel like a lot of people right now are you know, doing what they are doing to try to save their business so that it doesn't permanently close down. And look, it may permanently close down some businesses. Those businesses may have been on an edge heading into this, and this pandemic will have a disastrous effect for that. But I don't think the pandemic's gonna jam things. And you know, it's like in the GTA, some of the conversations I've been having around sales meetings there is now millennials are thinking this might be a way for them to own a house. So instead of getting, you know, 15 offers on a house, you'll get 12. But some of them may be people that were otherwise not in the market. So for some people that will be lost out, there will some people be gaining. I know, Costa, you probably want to jump in.
Yeah, Costa.
Thank you. And just to sort of add on to that, Jason's right. You know, yes, it's going to slow down because of the job losses. And you know, Phil, you said, you know, we're in a recession, and that recession happened because of a health matter that was a global pandemic.
Right. Not an economic matter.
It had nothing to do economically because everything was chugging along I mean, we all took the prosperity pre-March 12th for granted. It was like, wow, this thing just keeps chugging along. And then all of a sudden, not because of an economic crisis, but a health crisis, which, yes, it's very real and it's impactful and has impacted us. So I believe that we're going to get out of it. I mean, I'm not an economist to know when, but the desire, the appetite, the need, where we were at, I really believe it's a pause. And then when the pause is lifted, it won't be like 2008 where the banks, there's a lot of fluidity right now. There's a lot of liquidity in the banks right now, thanks to the federal government. And so will things change? Where prices will land, not certain. What I can tell you as a national association is that we're going to make sure, because there will be transactions that are happening. Not sure where the prices will be, but the number of transactions will be there. We will get out of this when the pause is lifted. And you know what, will there be a change? Yeah, housing could probably change after the pandemic. The impact, it could impact its decisions on about density, about transportation, about security, about communication. I mean, those things might change because when we're out of this stuff, but it won't put a halt on the housing market.
Yeah, you know what? You both make very, very valid points. Coming into this, and still today, because this is one thing that doesn't change, Canada had the highest level rate of household formation in the developed world. So this was, people leaving their parents' home and setting up households. This is new Canadians coming and setting up households. And we had much more demand for housing than we had the supply of housing. If you look at part of the reason Canada did so well in the Great Recession of a decade ago, the government played an important role. The Bank of Canada played an important role, but we can't forget the real estate industry and the financial services industry, our banking system. And in this case, the banking system saw what was going to happen, and they very early on engaged with the federal government, and they have put in place a 6-month mortgage deferral program. So my expectation is we will not see a huge bump in mortgage defaults in this country because we've prepared for it. And we've got the kind of cooperative, efficient financial services industry that supports a cooperative, efficient real estate industry, and provincial and federal governments that are working in concert with private business. So, I know CREA will release their insight into the real estate market later this month. So will Royal LePage. So I'd ask everybody online to tune in, because it's important that you keep in touch with your clients and let them know what is happening with home values. I was asked by a reporter last week, what do you think the main thing is that Canadians are worried about or concerned about as it relates to the real estate market? I said, one thing, the value of homes. If they don't own one, if they're a first-time home buyer, they wonder if there's going to be an opening. Jason's point, if they own a home, it's probably the biggest asset in their personal family portfolio, and they're worried about the value of that. So I think it will be a good news story. And even though this crisis is huge, and even though the impact on the Canadian economy is huge, it is violent, swift, and relatively short. We're talking about weeks and months, not months and years. Listen, guys, do you have anything broad-based words of advice? Let me turn to your term, Jason. You were a president, a vice president, so you knew you were going to become president. And then you've been president of one of the largest professional services organizations in the country. What are some of your memories of this? What have you taken away from this year of leadership and the years that led up to it?
Geez, I think I might have to write a book, Phil. I don't know if we have enough
buy
time.
That book, Jason.
Yeah,
Did you enjoy your time?
I really enjoyed my time. My joke, because I'm a very I like to look at humor as my inner channel, and so my joke has been, a lot of the past presidents of CREA, told me that I would never forget my year, and boy, were they ever right. I'll never forget this year. We started off. I started off this year under a different dynamic. we fell short on a few things at our AGM with the realtor code and strengthening enforcement across the country. And, we kind of started off in a different place. And I brought, I want to throw a shout out to Barb Succo, Barb, and we've been bookend. I've been blessed to be bookended with great people. There's Barb on one side of me, Costa, as everybody's seen on this line, on the other side, and Cliff Stevenson is on the other side of him. And, we got a great officer team. So that's been fantastic. So together we brought in this team approach, and we've accomplished, and we will accomplish great things. And it's a real weird place to end in. I'm not going to lie to you. I thought ending this would have
you were worried that you were just going to break all the sales records.
But
not that you had to deal with a plague of biblical proportion.
Yeah, and part of who I am is, in the face of adversity, is to stand up tall and be there. And I really enjoyed the conversations. I will continue to enjoy the conversations. I'll continue to be there for realtors. A few of the people in the question and answer have, what resources are there? CREA is working every day. I'll just try to answer a few of the questions, if you don't mind, in the minute that you're going to give me. There's CREA.ca. There's a COVID section in there that talks about, Phil, what you were talking about, economic stats. It's a ready, set, go format.
Yep.
Set phase, what will happen with the economy, and then the go phase is there. It's been a unique opportunity that I am sure I will really, once I'm out of this and I have time to myself, reflect on and say, it was phenomenal. I mean, I was in a private room meeting setting with George W. Bush. And you look back when that happened in November, and I thought to myself, I was meeting, certainly a president in my time that, a lot of people don't give that guy the credit, but as history goes on,
he looks a lot better nowadays.
Yeah, in a different format,
in context.
But he shared his 9/11 raw experiences with us. And as much as I was interested in that, it provided me a leadership context to where I'm at right now, to not panic and not to run. And a lot of people are like, oh my goodness, how do you do this? And it's, sometimes you look back and you think, man, that was just at the right place at the right time. And
yeah, it's true. Although it's strange how these things happen for a reason.
Yeah, it didn't end, and I'm sure it's not going to start for Costa like we designed this to. We're making the best of it. We're going to be there for people now into the future, and I've been very blessed, to having had these conversations.
So now that you're on your way out, what do you really think of our relatively new CEO, Michael?
Oh, I mean, look, he's
a joke.
He's got an awful sense. No, he's got an awful sense of humor, and I'll section this out of the recording. His sense of humor is awful. However, again, stepping up in the face of adversity. Look, my dad always used to give me this saying: anybody can win. It takes a real person to show how you lose. And I've lost some positions in my life, Phil. It's funny. A lot of people don't know this. I lost running for the CREA board in a regional election. And, I could have taken my chip and my ball and run home, or I could fight back and then win at large, which, coming from St. John, New Brunswick, was unheard of. But at the end of the day, real people step up in the time of an adversity, of a loss, and so I think all the CREA staff, but certainly led by the CEO, have been stepping up.
Thanks, Jason. That was, and again, thank you for your service. Costa, we're going to turn things over to some questions online, but what do you have in store for your year? Obviously, fighting COVID-19 or the economic impact and impact on our industry is part of it, but you probably have other things that you'd like to get done during your tenure.
Thanks, Phil. Again, great question. And it's funny because the whole theme and next week was going to be the AGM, and the whole premise was going to be embrace change. That was my overlying thing, is together we can embrace change and we can come out stronger. I mean, that message is more true today than it was 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, when we actually put my thoughts down on paper and where we want it to go. So that's going to be the continued theme, is that we have to embrace change. We have to do it collectively, collaboratively. you know what, our MLS, the genesis of MLS was built on cooperating and sharing.
Yes.
Not when somebody competes, somebody wins or loses, but when
Yeah.
we cooperate and when we share resources and professionalism, we all come out as winners. And so to that point, that's what we have to, we can't do it alone. This is not a one person, a one board, a one, so this is everybody, every stakeholder, leaders like you, like Royal LePage across the country, getting involved as you are always involved, working together with the National Association, provincial and local. And I mean, you've got some great legal leaders at every level, not just realtors, but I work with many of them and broker owners
Yeah.
in my own London community. You got some great leaders, and this is the time of sharing, and it's about let's keep that professionalism and the realtor brand top of mind, because that's how we're going to come out of this standing united and embracing the change.
Here. Well said. Well said. I think we're in good hands, folks. And these good folks are more than willing to take some of your questions. Can I turn things over to you, Mike or Kelly? And you could read us some of your favorite questions from the field.
So can you hear me? Good?
Sure can.
Okay, awesome. So quite a few questions on the benefit and how it impacts realtors. And the questions really, and like I said, there were a number of them. It's really about when it starts. Is it when the deal is written, or is it when when your deal closed? And even because so many checks have been delayed, is it when you get paid? So when does it start, number one? And do you need to apply monthly?
One thing I'll say just before you leap in, Jason, in the Royal LePage Daily Digest, which comes out to you every day, we include information from CREA, pointers to where you can get information both on RLP Network, but also from CREA directly. And it includes background information on exactly this, but it is changing rapidly. And I know Jason has been right at the forefront of these changes.
Yeah, thanks. Our understanding is when you physically get paid, when the money's dropped into your account, or I guess the check would be written. We're just telling people we're not trying to, don't act on what Jason Stevens saying on a Royal LePage webinar.
Take it to the bank.
But at the end of the day, be honest, be truthful with government, be transparent. What we understand is they've clarified the language from working to not receiving pay in 14 days. So that would be when your brokerage writes you a check, I believe. Maybe it's a question for the accountants, but it's 14 days of lost income. You know what I've said to a lot of realtors, it's lost income. It's meant for people that don't have the ability to get money, but still have bills on the other end. It's not your chance to get $2,000 from the government. It's really to ease the burden for Canadians across the country in all sectors.
Yep. No, it's a good point. And we do have people, everybody's going to suffer economically this year in the industry. Big companies, small companies are going to suffer. Revenue is going to be lower. But if you have a huge successful practice, your ability to weather this storm is going to be much different than the young realtor who was hoping to do half a dozen transactions this year. So we have to keep that in mind. Back to you, Kelly.
Great, thanks. From a reputational perspective, I know that CREA is launching a new ad campaign, and we've had some questions around what you're doing now. Could you, on social media, leverage realtors to show how they're keeping homeowners and home buyers safe? And what are we doing for messaging post-COVID-19 to keep moving forward and keep the realtor as the center of the value in the transaction?
So I'm going to toss the ad piece to Costa. I'm just going to start out. That was one of the questions I was trying to slide in there when I was talking. The COVID section in the CREA.ca website, which will be a dynamic site and change as we have it, will be a tool for consumers. The ready stage is where we are right now, which has a lot of unanswered and uncertain, pieces to our environment. At some point, there's going to be a certainty, and then there's going to be, the barn doors are open, go back to, a somewhat normal life. Although I believe back to our conversation earlier, we're not going to go from, where we are today to absolute normalcy. I think it's going to take a lot of time. I'm not even sure that doesn't spread into next year in terms of, will people want to go to an open house of 25 people they don't know, like that sort of piece of it, I think is going to have a long lasting effect. How we even hang around a grocery store, I don't think is going to immediately go back to how we did when we entered into this. Having said that, with this ready, set, go right now, we're in the ready stage. So it's going to be mainly for realtors. When we get to the set stage, there's going to be an economic housing outlook and consumer-based information and why, I'm sure a lot of the information we talked about here about leveraging the knowledge of a realtor coast to coast, and then the go phase is what it is. But I'll turn it to Costa, and he can talk about the ad. He was on the ad committee, and they did a phenomenal job, hit a home run this year.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. So as far as the question as to the ad, what CREA is doing, we do have a new ad. We made a decision. We just had it completed, and we had contracts in place with TV buy-ins and all media buy-ins, and so we had to quickly stop when this COVID pandemic hit, and so we had to make a decision. Look, we don't want to come out there pushing a realtor brand in these uncertain times. And this was March 12th when this just happened. And then state of emergencies were happening all over and provincially, and the federal government was putting out these the new rules with health agencies putting out the guidelines that are in place. So we had to make a decision. We had all these contracts. We managed to cancel a few of the contracts because timing was definitely not appropriate or right. There were a few contracts we could not cancel because had we canceled them, it would have cost us somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million. So we canceled the ones that were on the TSNs, the sports nets, things where nobody was watching that we had the ability to cancel. We ran the ads on a reduced schedule, much reduced, with the ability to ramp up when the pause is lifted, and that's going to be the key point. So we ran them on, and the good thing is with the focus groups and the professionals that were behind the ads are not salesy, and that would have been the worst thing to put out there. And
thank goodness, that was good. Good luck and good planning.
Yeah, and so we're going to put it out. We're going to double down when the pause is lifted. We're going to just put tremendous financial resources and buy time at that point to enhance the realtor brand.
Excellent. Kelly, I'll throw one other thing in there. Costa talked about the change imperative and how technology change was something we were grappling with and in fact embracing, but now change has been forced upon us by this health crisis. We have to differentiate between what we like doing and what is necessary for the real estate transaction. Take open houses, for example. People like them. They're a fun social thing to do. You can get decorating ideas, even if you're not in the market to buy a house. A great way to spend a sunny spring day. They're not necessary in the home sales process, at least not a in-person group gathering of people. So, gone from the post-COVID-19 era as we move through a period where there's still a danger that we could get infected in close personal contact. So we will move through a period where social management is the norm, where a realtor will safely conduct a showing of a home with one or two people, and that can be done in a very safe environment, much safer than many forms of commerce that are going on today, like grocery shopping. And people will get their head around that, and they will say, okay, this is the norm. You will get the head around this. I believe that transactions will probably happen a little quicker. I believe that people will utilize the information you send them to make decisions a little quicker. And that the entire process will, in fact, be a little more efficient. Anyway, back to you, Kelly.
I think she's muted.
Yeah, Kelly, we can't hear you. Sorry.
Sorry, thanks for that. That's a great segue, Phil, into our next question, which is about realtors who are not necessarily following the guidelines. They must not be Royal LePage realtors then, but let's say there are other realtors out in the world, CREA members who are having open houses or door knocking or doing things that they shouldn't be. Is there a way to enforce this, or is there any recourse for other realtors in the industry to, let's say, call out their cooperating brokers?
Yeah, maybe you could talk about enforcement in general and CREA's role versus provincial regulators, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I will. I'm going to deal with the calling out one because, that's such a divisive piece and a non-positive use of people's time. And I know in my local board, when this pandemic first started, there was, bickering back and forth. And I was showing homes to people who had written a contract prior to COVID-19. And I still got one set of clients where their house burned down and they rented an apartment on a very short-term basis, not thinking they would be self-isolated with their 3-year-old and both working from home. There are reasons out there why somebody would have to conduct it. Having said that, we have been working with most provincial associations. Well, sorry, we've been working with all the provincial associations. Most of those have some really good guidelines. I mean, Quebec's a whole different story. Everything's just shut, that's simple.
Although the word is that they are going to adopt a process. Obviously, this is rumor out of Quebec City that they're going to adopt a process more similar to Ontario's in May. So we'll see.
Right.
We've got
and then AREA's been working in Manitoba and BCR, like all these provincial. So New Brunswick, where I'm from, is a different beast altogether because we're co-regulated. So when the provincial association speaks, it's government regulation. So it's one of those things where it's not easily handled from the National Association. It is easily coordinated through, and all those provincial associations have been in touch with our CEO, and he's aware of what the guidelines are. And it was most of those provincial associations that came calling in and around that open house time that led the discussion to taking that down. So there's things that we can play, but there's lanes that we got to be very careful that we don't get into in this sort of thing. And that's the regulatory one is one of them. We've had banks that have reached out to us and said, could you provide us a COVID form? But you guys, Royal LePage, other franchisors around have been doing a great job with those forms. And on a regulatory thing, those are mostly provincial. So we've put those requests back to the provinces.
There's bad cops, there's bad doctors, and there's bad realtors. There are people who will do bad things in any industry, in any group of society. And usually society has a way of slapping the wrist for them. I don't think we need to do it, through public media.
Before I toss to Costa, because I know he wants to say something, I'm a big believer. Those people will be the first out of this business because people will take account of what's going on here and not use those people when we get out of this pandemic. That's my belief.
Costa?
And I just want to say, the person that asked the question, we feel the pain. It's across the country. If 95 to 98% of realtor members are abiding by doing their social responsibility, their community responsibility, putting people before profits, and they're abiding by all these rules, and then you have 2% or whatever that number is of these reckless, I'm going to call them not even realtors, reckless registrants, licensees that are rogues that are doing things completely opposite and really are jeopardizing the consumer at heart and everybody else in our industry, in our profession, because if we get yanked, then the consumers are the ones that are going to be hurt if they pull the essential services. So it's a valid question. The answer is, as Jason said, and Phil, as you said, it's difficult for CREA as a trade association or provincial associations that are associations, trade associations, and there are regulatory bodies in each province that monitor, and they have, I guess, the teeth. But this is the time where we're talking about, let's collaborate, let's talk together. And if there is a reckless behavior, one agent that is totally reckless, we do need to hear about those people, and we do need them to reach out to the provincial association and the regulator and spotlight or highlight their actions so that they don't ruin it for everybody else.
Yeah,
and so,
you know what, and I know you've been through this, Costa, as the owner of a brokerage. Typically, I've fired people in Royal LePage, and with the cooperation of our local management. And I know you've fired people. You know, that's why we have managers in this industry. And if it's truly bad, that's typically what I do. Is go to the manager, explain the concern, and if there's always provincial regulators and that process, but it's slow. And the quick way to end that kind of problem is just to boot them out of their firm. Kelly.
Great. So we are at 12:08. We're over time, but we'll wrap it up with one last question, which
Perfect.
is kind of a good note to end it on. Let's say the post-pandemic adjustment period. How long do you think until we're back to normal, until realtors can start going in their prospects' homes and doing a CMA, meeting with clients to sign a buyer agency agreement? Do you see this turning around overnight, or is it going to be a period of adjustment?
What do you think, Jason?
I think there's going to be a period of adjustment. I think it's going to, you know, it's no different than when I got in a car accident a few years ago. I had to put myself back into a car and start driving it again. I think there's going to be a level of comfort. Look, I've got 4 or 5 clients right now that have paused on the market. They have a need, but not an essential need to
Right.
purchase a house. They don't want to put themselves in harm's way. I think it's going to be a transition. I do believe, though, that speaking to what Costa was talking about earlier, I believe that the gates will open quicker for us out of this than most other businesses. I think because we can, a realtor with the use of technology can resort to normalcy quicker through offers through DocuSign and other e-signature platforms that we have out there. So I do believe that we will get out of this quicker than some other industries. But I don't think it's going to be I think it's going to be a marathon, not a sprint. I really think that it's going to be a scenario where we have to put one step at a time. And if this is the last time that I speak, I just want to let everybody know it's been an unreal opportunity. Phil, thank you for your leadership. You're a part of our broker committee. We get into the weeds on some pretty significant issues last week.
Yep, it was great.
You're the voice of reason. You represent your company very well. And I just want to assure everybody on this webinar that the National Association does understand your pain and your needs, and we are going to be there to invest heavily. It's a notion that I've taken head on, which kind of answers the question. A lot of people have asked me if we're going to defer our dues. Our dues are $310 a year, $25 a month. We could only do 1 month. We know realtors want deals, not $25. So we're going to take that $3.5 million and invest it when we're out of this. And that speaks to that person's question, is that will allow us to invest when people are paying attention, whether that's the ad, realtor.ca search optimization, working with franchisors and what their needs are through the broker committee. We will be there when it can translate to deals and building that pipeline back up. And that will be the face of this adversity. People will look back at the National Association and say, well, that $310 for the advocacy reputation technology is the best $310 that I spend in the run of a year. And Phil, thank you very much for the last year, and thanks for this opportunity. I'll toss it to Costa.
Well, thank you, Jason. And just to answer that question head on from your last person that asked the question, when will this thing be over and what do we see? I mean, nobody knows exactly when it will be over, but I agree with Jason. It won't be a switch like, okay, March 12th, this is what happened. All the orders went in place, and on X date, the switches flipped the other way. I think it'll be gradual, but I think that we have to monitor this as they gradually open up the workforce, as the curve gets flattened, as the numbers keep coming in. I mean, this is changing daily. It's not weekly, it's daily. And at some point, government is going to say, okay, we're going to start doing certain things, and we're hoping that real estate services and our services will be, as Jason said, first ones out to say, look, you've behaved well. We've got the technology and the resources to conduct business in a safe environment for everyone. So I think we'll have an opportunity to get out there first, and it'll give us the latitude to do transactions in a different way. And that'll be the new normal for a while, but it won't be a long pause. It'll be a different way of when the pause is lifted.
Listen, I'll throw my 2 cents in about how this is going to unfold. The first thing to realize is there's a big difference between a return to writing business and a return to the normal way of writing business. So there is a surprising amount of business being written even now under these extremely unusual circumstances. That will move. I've talked before about a narrow U-shaped recession. So we're on that downside. We will move to a period where transactions aren't falling anymore, where we're flat. And there's a number of transactions, and people will gradually get comfortable with the concept of working with a realtor again in using highly unusual techniques, but safe, reliable techniques. And then those buyers are going to come in. And those young buyers are going to come into the market because they don't have a home to sell. They don't have the need to prepare their property and to let strangers on their property. And we're going to have an imbalance of more buyers than we have properties for sale. And that's going to strangely put upward pressure on prices. And that word will start to get out on the street. And Canadians will begin to say, okay, we needed to do this. We delayed for all the right reasons, because we're good citizens and because we wanted to keep our families safe. But it now to risk putting the property on the market. And it'll, and I've talked about this before, it'd be like a Canadian car in winter when there's snow on the road. The tire will be spinning a little bit, but suddenly it's going to catch some asphalt and it's going to rip ahead. And I think when we hit the other side of that U, it's going to take off quite rapidly. And we're going to see a vigorous market being conducted in highly unusual ways. So get used to an extended period of social distancing, of using virtual tools to conduct your practice, but get prepared for substantially more transactions in the not too distant future. That's you heard it here. All right, let me turn to Jason first. Thank you again for your service. You've been an amazing president. You got dealt a hand that no one could have predicted, and you did it with style and grace and optimism. Costa, you're a wonderful guy with a great reputation. You've been a very successful business person, and I know you're going to be a very strong and successful leader of our National Association. Thank you both for being here, and thank you, Kelly, for running a tight, well-organized webinar, and yet still allowing us to go a little bit over time, showing you have flexibility.
Yes,
Thanks,
most welcome. Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Have a
you.
great
Bye-bye,
afternoon.
everybody.
Bye.
Talk soon.